"You're going to have sex with me," said the virgin women he discovered in his abandoned rancher. John had always loved the quiet of the countryside. The wide fields, the slow hum of insects in the summer, and the soft golden light of evening made him feel like he belonged somewhere. For years he had dreamed of owning a ranch, a place he could call his own, far from the chaos of the city. When he finally inherited his uncle's old ranch on the edge of a small town, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The place had been abandoned for years. Brass. Dust lay thick on the wooden floors. The paint on the walls peeled like old bark, and the smell of stale air filled the rooms.
But John saw potential.
He imagined the mornings with fresh coffee on the porch, the horses grazing in the field, and the quiet nights under the stars. The first few days were hard. The ranch needed repairs. The roof leaked in places. The old water pump groaned whenever it ran, and the barn was almost falling apart. Yet John felt alive working there. Each hammer strike, each nail driven into the weathered wood reminded him that he was building something real. As he worked, he also explored the property. Walking along the dusty trails and through the overgrown fields, he noticed a few old sheds tucked into corners of the land, some empty, some with remnants of old tools and supplies. The ranch had a strange feeling, like it held stories that had been waiting for someone to listen. One late afternoon, after a long day fixing the fence and clearing the weeds from the garden, John decided to check the farthest corner of the property. He had seen it from a distance, a small, almost hidden cabin behind a row of old oaks. It looked as if no one had been near it for years. Curiosity tugged at him. He wanted to know everything about this place he had inherited, to understand its secrets, and maybe even to imagine who had once lived there. As he approached the cabin, he noticed something odd. The door, though old and weathered, was slightly open. A faint light flickered inside. John's heart skipped a beat. He had expected emptiness, dust, maybe some animals that had wandered in. He had not expected this. He stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether he should enter. Part of him wanted to run back to the safety of the main house, and part of him urged caution mixed with curiosity. After a deep breath, he pushed the door gently. It creaked loudly, echoing across the empty cabin. Inside, he saw signs that someone had been living there. A small fire had recently burned in the old fireplace, and a few belongings were neatly placed on a wooden table. Clothes were folded carefully on a bench. A notebook lay open, filled with neat handwriting. The cabin felt alive in a way the rest of the ranch had not. John realized he had not been alone on his property. His mind raced with questions. Who could it be? How long had they been here? Were they in trouble? Or was this simply someone looking for a place to hide from the world? He stepped inside slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. As he moved around, he noticed the belongings belonged to a woman. The handwriting in the notebook was delicate but firm. There were drawings, notes about the days, observations of nature, and even lists of meals she had prepared. Sean felt a mix of emotions, surprise, curiosity, and concern. He did not want to startle her. He called out softly. Hello? Desk. I live here now. Is anyone there? For a moment, there was silence. Then, from a corner of the room, a figure appeared. She was young, with careful eyes that seemed wary but not unkind. She looked at him, and for a second, neither spoke. The tension was thick, but it was not hostile. She seemed as surprised to see him as he was to see her. I didn't mean to intrude, John said gently. I
I didn't know anyone else was here.
I know, she said softly. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just needed a place to stay for a while. I didn't know who else to turn to. John felt a strange mix of relief and responsibility. He realized this encounter could not be ignored. It would be easy to tell her to leave, but something in her eyes suggested she was not dangerous. She was simply someone who had found herself alone and needed shelter. He offered a small smile. It's okay. We can figure this out together. There's more than enough space here. They talked for hours that evening. Desperate talk for 5 hours afternoon. They talked for hours that evening. They talked for hours that evening. She had been traveling looking for work, and when she discovered the abandoned ranch, it had seemed like a place to rest, even temporarily. She explained she had tried to survive quietly, without disturbing anyone. John listened, realizing that this was not a story of trouble or fear. It was a story of survival, of human needs, and of finding connection in unexpected places. As night fell, the ranch seemed even more alive. The stars shone brightly in the clear sky, and the wind whispered through the trees. John and Emily sat on the porch, sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams, and the reasons that had brought them to this moment. The fear and tension melted into something softer, an understanding that sometimes life brings people together in the most unusual ways. By the time John went to sleep that night, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. He realized that the abandoned ranch was no longer just a property. It was a home in the making, a place where human lives intersected, even unexpected. Emily's presence was a reminder that life was unpredictable, and that sometimes kindness and understanding were more important than rules or ownership. The next morning, John awoke to the sound of birds chirping and sunlight streaming through the windows. Emily was already awake, preparing breakfast with a few items she had brought. John felt a sense of peace. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected to the land, not just as a property, but as a living space that carried stories, people, and moments of discovery. Over the next few days, John and Emily began to work together on the ranch. They cleaned, repaired, and organized. Each day brought small victories. The barn doors that finally swung open without squeaking, the garden that slowly started to bloom, and the trails that became easier to walk. The ranch transformed under their combined effort, and so did their understanding of each other. John realized that this encounter, which had started as a shock, was now a turning point in his life. The abandoned ranch had become a place of new beginnings, and Emily's presence reminded him that life was often about sharing, understanding, and helping one another, even when the circumstances were unexpected. As he looked out over the fields one evening, watching Emily water the garden, John felt a quiet satisfaction. The ranch was no longer just a dream. It was a place alive with stories, challenges, and the potential for new connections. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly at home. Days turned into weeks on the ranch. The mornings were quiet but full of life. Birds chirped from the trees. Dew clung to the tall grass, and the smell of fresh earth filled the air after John and Emily tended to the garden. Slowly, the ranch began to feel less abandoned and more like a home. Every corner seemed to hold a story, and each day brought small surprises. Hidden drawers filled with old letters, a tin box under the floorboards, and the faint echo of someone's laughter in the wind, as if the place remembered its past. John had come to realize that Emily was more than just a temporary visitor. She had a way of seeing things differently, noticing the beauty in broken fences, forgotten tools, and wild flowers that grew where no one had planted them. Her presence brought a calm, almost magical energy to the ranch, and John found himself looking forward to her thoughts and opinions on every decision he made, from repairing the barn to planting new crops. One morning, while clearing an overgrown path behind the cabin, John stumbled upon an old stone well hidden under tangled vines. The wooden cover was rotting, and the edges were covered in moss. Curious, he brushed the vines aside and peered into the darkness. It seemed deep, and the water reflected a faint glimmer from the morning sunlight. Emily appeared behind him, carrying a basket of freshly picked herbs. "Wow," she whispered, stepping closer. "I didn't know there was a well here. It must be very old." "It's probably been here for decades. Maybe even longer than the cabin."
Do you think it's safe?
Emily examined the stones carefully. It looks solid enough on the surface, but we should be careful.
"It might be hiding something, or someone might have used it in the past." The ranch had always seemed quiet, almost lonely, but there was a feeling that it had witnessed many lives over the years. The well was just another piece of its history, a reminder that places, like people, carried stories that were sometimes hidden and waiting to be discovered. That afternoon, they decided to explore the fields behind the ranch. The tall grass swayed in the wind, and the sun cast golden shadows across the rolling hills. John noticed that the land was full of surprises, old wooden fences that led to nowhere, stones arranged in unusual patterns, and strange marks on some of the trees, as if someone had carved messages decades ago. Break. Emily crouched by one of the trees, running her fingers along the rough bark. Breaths.
Look at this,
She said, tracing the faint letters with her finger.
it's a name.
And a date. 1923. John leaned closer. That's a long time ago. Rasp. Whoever carved this must have wanted to be remembered.
Places like this, they hold memories.
People leave pieces of themselves behind, even if no one notices. It makes the land feel alive, doesn't it?
John smiled.
Yeah, it's like the ranch is speaking to us, if we take the time to listen.
As they continued walking, they found an old, partially collapsed shed.
Its roof had fallen in, and the walls were covered in ivy. But inside, amidst the dust and broken wood, they discovered a small collection of objects, rusted tools, faded photographs, and a leather-bound journal.
Emily picked up the journal carefully, brushing off the dust. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but the handwriting was still legible.
"This is amazing," Emily said softly, flipping through the pages. "It's someone's life, recorded here, day by day."
John examined the photographs.
Black and white images showed families, animals, and scenes of ranch life from decades ago. The people in the pictures smiled, unaware of the challenges that awaited them. John felt a strange connection to the past, as if the ranch itself was telling him its story through these objects. Over the next few days, John and Emily spent hours reading the journal and examining the photographs. The journal belonged to a woman named Clara, who had lived on the ranch nearly a century ago. Her writing was full of hope, humor, and dreams. She described planting gardens, caring for animals, and the simple joys of living close to nature. But she also wrote about struggles, harsh winters, illness, and loneliness. Despite the challenges, Clara's words were full of life and determination. Emily closed the journal thoughtfully. "Despair. She reminds me of us," she said. "Working hard, trying to make something last, finding joy in little things, even when it's difficult." John nodded. "Yeah. It's amazing to think about how many people have lived here before us, each leaving a part of themselves behind." The presence of Clara's story added a new layer to the ranch. It wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was a place of memory, resilience, and connection. John felt proud to be a part of that story now, carrying the legacy of those who had worked and dreamed here before him.
One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, John and Emily sat on the porch with mugs of warm tea.
The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and the distant mountains looked like silhouettes against the glowing horizon.
Do you ever think about the people who lived here before us? Emily asked quietly.
Every day, John admitted. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to meet them, to see the ranch when it was full of life and noise. Emily smiled. Maybe we're meant to feel that way, to imagine their lives, and in doing so, honor them. John looked at her, realizing how much he had come to rely on her presence, not just for help on the ranch, but for her perspective, her insight, and her quiet strength. They had started as strangers thrown together by chance, but now they were a team, connected by curiosity, hard work, and the shared experience of discovery. The next morning brought another surprise. While clearing the old barn, John found a hidden compartment in the floor. It was small and carefully concealed, like someone had wanted to keep its contents safe. Inside there were letters tied with faded ribbons and a small box containing coins from decades ago.
Emily picked up one of the letters, reading it aloud in her soft, clear voice.
Round and desk. It's from Clara, she said. She wrote to a friend in town talking about her hopes for the future and how she wished someone would find her words one day. John felt a shiver run down his spine. It was as if Clara had left a message for them, reaching across time to connect with the present. He realized that the ranch had a way of bringing people together, past and present, strangers and friends, through its hidden stories and quiet persistence. Days passed, and the bond between John and Emily deepened. They worked together to restore parts of the ranch, often laughing at small mistakes or sharing stories about their lives before the ranch. Emily told John about her travels, the people she had met, and the lessons she had learned along the way. John shared his dreams, the challenges of city life, and the reasons he had wanted to leave it all behind. Each story added layers to their friendship, making the ranch feel like a true home, not just a property. One afternoon, as they were repairing a broken fence near the edge of the property, Emily paused to look at the horizon. "There's something peaceful about this place," she said. "Even when things are hard, or when the work never seems to end, it feels alive. Like we're part of something bigger than ourselves." Psst, I feel the same way. It's like the ranch has its own heartbeat. And maybe, in a way, it's teaching us how to live better, how to care, to notice, to appreciate the little things. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, John felt a deep sense of gratitude. Abandoned ranch had become a place of discovery, connection, and growth. Emily's presence had transformed it, turning it from a quiet, lonely place into a space full of life and possibilities. And in that moment, John realized that the ranch was no longer just about him. It was about the people, the history, and the stories that made it whole. Yet, even as they celebrated their progress, there was a quiet curiosity lingering in the air. The ranch had more secrets to reveal, more stories waiting to be discovered. And John, Emily, and the land itself were ready to uncover them, one hidden corner, one forgotten letter, and one shared experience at a time. Weeks passed, and the ranch was beginning to take shape in a way neither John nor Emily had expected. The garden was thriving. The barn doors swung easily on newly repaired hinges, and the cabin had become warm and welcoming. Every morning, the air smelled of fresh earth and flowers, and the quiet was filled with the soft sounds of animals, wind through the trees, and the occasional laughter of two people who were learning to trust each other. One crisp morning, John noticed something unusual while walking along the edge of the property. A small trail hidden by tall grass seemed to wind toward the forest beyond the ranch. It hadn't been there before, or at least he had never seen it. "Curious," he called Emily over. "Look at this," he said, pointing. "I don't remember seeing this trail before." "It looks like someone has been walking here recently." Emily knelt down and examined the path. "You're right. The grass is flattened, and there are footprints." but I don't think it's recent. Maybe a few days old. Whoever made it might be hiding something, or leading us to something.
John felt a mix of excitement and caution.
The ranch had already revealed so many of its secrets, and now it seemed there was more to uncover. "Do you want to follow it?" he asked. This perspective. Emily nodded, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Of course. We've already discovered so much it could be something important. Together, they followed the trail into the forest. Best. The trees were tall and dense, casting long shadows on the ground. Birds flew overhead, startled by their presence, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. The path led them deeper than they had ever gone before, twisting between trees and over small streams. The further they walked, the more they felt as if they were stepping back in time, into a part of the ranch that had remained untouched for decades. After nearly an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing. In the center was an old stone structure, partially hidden by vines. It looked like a storage building, or perhaps a root cellar, with a heavy wooden door that had long been weathered by rain and sun. John stepped closer, brushing away the vines.
"I've never seen anything like this on the property. Do you think it's been here since Clara's time?" Emily examined the structure carefully.
It's possible. The stones look very old, and the construction style matches the other parts of the ranch. But there's something else. Someone has tried to keep it hidden.
Why else would it be covered by so many plants? They pushed open the door together.
Breath. It creaked loudly, echoing into the stillness of the clearing. Inside, the air was cool and musty. Dust hung in the light that filtered through small cracks in the stone walls. As their eyes adjusted, they noticed shelves lined with objects that had been carefully stored. There were jars filled with seeds, old tools, and a collection of books that looked like they had been preserved for decades. Emily picked up one of the books, brushing off the dust.
"These are journals," she whispered. "Clara's handwriting."
Or maybe someone from her family. Look at this. Notes about planting, about the weather, even sketches of the animals she cared for.
John scanned the shelves. Among the journals and jars, he found a small wooden box.
It was locked, but there was no sign of a key. "I wonder what's inside," he said. Emily's eyes widened. Maybe it's something important. Something she wanted to keep safe for the future. For people like us who would find it. They decided to carry the box back to the cabin, planning to try and open it together. On the walk back, John and Emily talked quietly about the history of the ranch. They speculated about the people who had lived there, their hopes, their struggles, and the reasons why so much had been hidden away. The ranch seemed to be revealing itself in pieces, like a puzzle waiting for the right hands to put it together. Once they returned to the cabin, they set the box on the table. John tried to open it gently, rocking it back and forth, but the lock would not budge. Emily examined it closely. "It's clever." Whoever made this wanted to make sure only someone careful and patient could open it.
Maybe it's not just about the box. It's about understanding the ranch and its history.
They decided to leave the box for a moment and continue their work around the ranch. That day, they repaired more fencing, planted new vegetables, and even started clearing the overgrown orchard. By evening, they were exhausted but satisfied. As the sun set, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and pink, John looked at Emily and smiled. "You know," he said, "I never imagined that finding an abandoned ranch would lead to all this. History, mysteries, and, well, you."
Emily laughed softly. "I feel the same way."
Despotations. It's funny how life brings people together sometimes through the strangest circumstances.
The next morning, they returned to the box. Emily had brought an old hairpin from the cabin, thinking it might help pick the lock.
Bester. After careful effort and a little trial and error, the lock finally clicked. Inside the box, they found something that made both of them gasp. A collection of letters, some yellowed with age, and a small leather-bound book with a symbol etched on the cover. John opened the first letter. It was addressed to Clara, written by someone named Margaret. The handwriting was neat but urgent. Margaret wrote about changes happening in the town, about neighbors moving away, and about keeping the ranch safe. Some letters even mentioned Emily's favorite part of the property, the hidden well, the forest trail, and the stone building in the clearing.
Emily read one of the letters aloud. "Clara, I know you will find joy in this place. Protect it."
Care for it. And remember, the land has a memory.
It will guide those who listen carefully.
John looked at her, amazed. It's like they knew we would be here, discovering these things. Emily nodded slowly.
Or maybe it's a reminder that the ranch isn't just land.
It's a keeper of stories, of people, and of dreams. And now, it's ours to continue those stories. Brass. Over the next few days, John and Emily delved deeper into the journals and letters. They discovered sketches of hidden gardens, notes about secret paths, and instructions for caring for the orchard and livestock. Each page revealed a life dedicated to the ranch, a careful preservation of nature, and a hope that future caretakers would understand its importance. One afternoon, while working near the forest trail, they noticed movement at the edge of the trees. A small deer emerged, cautiously observing them before bounding away into the woods. John and Emily smiled at each other. The ranch seemed to be alive in every sense, not just with people's history, but with animals, plants, and the quiet rhythm of life that had existed long before them. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily spoke softly.
"You know, I think Clara and Margaret wanted someone who would truly care, not just for the land, but for the story it held. That's why they hid things away, kept letters, and preserved the journals. They trusted that one day someone would listen."
John reached over and took her hand, feeling a deep connection not just to her, but to the generations of people who had lived, worked, and dreamed on this ranch.
And I think we are listening.
We're learning, protecting, and continuing the story, and maybe in our own way, we're adding to it too. Broth.
The ranch had changed them both. It was no longer just a property to fix, or a place to escape the city.
It was a living memory, a puzzle of lives intertwined across decades, and a reminder that even forgotten places could bring people together. John and Emily felt honored to be part of that story, to care for it, and to uncover its mysteries, one secret at a time. Yet, despite all the discoveries, a small question lingered in their minds. The stone structure, the hidden letters, and the locked box hinted at more secrets still waiting to be found. Who else had lived on the ranch? What other stories were hidden in the forests, fields, and forgotten corners? And most importantly, what lessons had they yet to learn from the land itself? As night fell, the stars reflected in the small pond near the cabin, and a cool breeze rustled the trees. John and Desme sat together in silence, feeling the weight and the wonder of the day. The ranch had revealed so much, yet there was still more to discover. They were ready, patient, and eager to continue the journey, knowing that every discovery brought them closer to understanding the heart of the land and perhaps themselves. The days grew longer as spring fully arrived. Flowers bloomed in the garden, and the orchard, once wild and untended, began to show the first promise of fruit. Birds sang from every branch, and the air smelled sweet with fresh grass and blossoms. John and Emily had settled into a steady rhythm. Every morning they rose early to work, and every evening they sat on the porch, sharing their thoughts, their hopes, and sometimes their quiet reflections on the day. The ranch had changed their lives. After opening the locked box and exploring the stone structure, they felt a new responsibility toward the ranch. It was no longer just a place to live. It was a living story, full of voices from the past and lessons for the present. John often thought about Claire and Margaret, the women who had cared for the land decades ago, and how their careful notes and letters had guided him and Emily. He began to see the ranch not just as land, but as a teacher, a guide, and a reminder that life was best lived with care, patience, and understanding. One morning, John suggested they explore the forest near the edge of the property again. Narration. "I feel like there's more we haven't seen," he said. "Clara left clues, letters, and journals, but maybe there's something she wanted us to find that we haven't yet."
I agree. There's always something hidden in places like this, something that connects the past to the present.
"Let's go see what we can find." They packed a small bag with water, notebooks, and a few snacks and set off along the trail that had led them to the stone building weeks ago. The forest was alive with spring energy. Leaves rustled gently in the wind. Sunlight filtered through the branches, and the distant sound of a stream added a musical quality to their walk. As they followed the winding path, they noticed signs of careful planning by someone long ago. Stone markers placed at the edges of the trail, small stacks of branches that could serve as guides, and paths worn smooth with repeated use.
Emily said, her voice filled with wonder. Not just a walk through the forest, but a connection to everyone who's ever been here before us. John smiled. It's like the ranch is leading us. Maybe there's something waiting at the end of this path.
Something important. After nearly an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing. Breath. Sunlight poured in from above, illuminating a circle of flat stones in the center. Around the circle were carefully tended plants, herbs, and wildflowers. It was unlike any part of the ranch they had seen before. Deliberate, beautiful, and full of life. In the middle of the stones was a simple wooden box, smaller than the first, but carefully carved with initials and symbols. Emily knelt beside it. This has to be Clara's work.
He glances around in desperas. It's like a gift, a message for us.
John carefully opened the box. Inside were more letters and journals, along with a small leather pouch. The letters were written in Clara's handwriting, filled with reflections, advice, and stories about the ranch. Some were addressed to Margaret, others to no one in particular, as if she had written them for future caretakers to find. They spoke of patience, respect for nature, and the importance of community. The small leather pouch contained seeds, varieties of plants that had been grown on the ranch decades ago. John held the pouch carefully, realizing the significance. "Clara wanted someone to continue this," he said softly. "She wanted the ranch to stay alive, to grow, and to teach lessons for the future." Emily smiled. "And now it's our turn. We have the journals, the seeds, the knowledge, and we get to care for it." For the rest of the day, they worked in the clearing, planting the seeds in neat rows, tending to the herbs, and making notes in their own journals. It was a quiet, peaceful labor, but also full of meaning. Every seed they planted was a connection to the past, and every row they carefully tended was a promise for the future. That evening, as they returned to the cabin, John felt a deep sense of accomplishment. "You know," he said, "I thought finding this ranch would be about fixing buildings and planting gardens, but it's so much more. It's about understanding people, their dreams, and how they cared for something bigger than themselves."
Emily nodded.
"It's about life itself, isn't it? The land, the people, the stories. They're all connected, and we're part of it now."
Over the following weeks, John and Emily continued to restore and care for the ranch.
Breath. They repaired the barn completely, making it safe for animals. They planted fruit trees, flowers, and vegetables. Prescriptions, each one revealing small details about life on the ranch decades ago. Every discovery strengthened their connection to the land and to each other. One afternoon, while walking along the stream that ran through the property, Emily paused. "I've been thinking," she said, "about how much this ranch has changed us. We've learned patience, care, and how to appreciate the small things. And we've learned about trust between each other and with the land itself." Breath. John nodded thoughtfully.
I feel the same way.
"I came here expecting to find peace and work. What I found was much more: friendship, discovery, and a sense of purpose. But people who came before us, Clara, Margaret, and maybe even others whose stories we haven't found yet."
Spring turned into summer, and the ranch flourished.
The orchard bloomed, the garden produced fresh vegetables, and the barn was filled with animals that John and Emily cared for with joy. Neighbors began to visit, curious about the restored ranch, and John and Emily shared their discoveries, telling the story of the land and its past caretakers. The ranch became a small hub of learning and community, where people came to see what dedication, patience, and care could accomplish. One evening, after a long day of work, John and Emily sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky glowed in shades of pink, orange, and gold, reflecting in the pond near the cabin. They shared a quiet moment, feeling the peace and fulfillment that had come from months of hard work and discovery. "You know," John said softly, "this ranch has given us more than I ever imagined. It's more than a home. It's a story, a lesson, and a connection to the past. I think we've finally found our place." Brace. Emily smiled. "Yes. And we're not just caretakers. We're part of the story now. One day, someone else will find this ranch, and they'll discover what we've learned, just like we discovered Clara's messages." John looked out over the fields, feeling the land beneath his feet and the wind on his face. "I hope they do. And I hope they understand what it means to care, to notice, and to appreciate the life here." As night fell, stars blanketed the sky, twinkling over the ranch that had been abandoned for so long, but was now alive with care, history, and hope. The gentle sounds of the wind, the animals, and the distant stream filled the night. John and Emily knew there would always be more to discover: hidden corners, forgotten journals, and perhaps stories that had yet to be told, but for now they were content. The ranch had transformed their lives, taught them lessons about patience, care, and connection, and given them a purpose that went beyond themselves. Clara and Margaret's legacy lived on through the land: the letters, the seeds, and the work that John and Emily had done. And in the quiet moments they felt the presence of the past guiding them, reminding them that every life, every effort, and every story mattered. The next morning they walked together through the orchard, noting the growth of the new seedlings and the progress of the gardens. Birds sang from the trees, and the sunlight warmed the fields. For John and Emily, the ranch was no longer abandoned. It was a living, breathing story of life, care, and human connection. They had found not only a home, but a place where the past, present, and future could come together in harmony. And as they stood together hand in hand, looking out over the land, they knew that the ranch's story would continue long after them, because they had listened, cared, and become part of it.